Yeah. So yeah, this little mini series over the next 2 weeks, we're exploring this area of internationality, and we called it the Spiritual Challenge of Internationality, which might need a bit of unpacking. As to why we're calling it Spiritual Challenge, but we'll see what we get to. But just to sort of set the context a little bit, I was just thinking this afternoon about how to do that, and quite quickly I got into quite deep waters. I was like, oh my God, this isn't quite so simple as it might seem. Actually, trying to talk about this area, it needs quite a lot of subtlety and nuance. So I went downstairs to talk to Arthasiddhi to try and sort of get a bit more of a sort of subtle, nuanced sort of way of talking about this. But I guess one way of talking about it is, you could say, when you come along to the Buddhist Centre, what you're encountering is an international community. That's what true Vatna really is. That's one way of talking about true Vatna. It's the worldwide and therefore international community, Buddhist community. And actually, that's not just, I don't know, a kind of practical thing of how many people you could reach. Actually, that's an expression of the Buddha's vision of what it means to be human, what humanity is. That there's something common to humanity, sort of aside the accidents of when we were in conditions. But how to quite talk about that is a bit, that's where we start to get into deep water. So one story for me, actually, is when I was at one of our retreat centres at Istana, and there was a course going on, it's called the International Course. So people from all over the world, order members from all over the world getting together and working out, exploring how to deepen their practice of Buddhism, but doing that together. People from Poland, people from India, people from Australia, people from America, people from Germany, Spain, Mexico, and I was asked to go over and do something for them, but it was a real privilege, actually, being in that company, in that sort of assembly. And the moment that particularly came to mind was I was sitting down over lunch with one of the Indian order members, a woman, and it really moved me. I was really, really sort of moved by the exchange we had. Because as we talked, I think I just asked her something like, what does it mean for you to be on this course, with these people in this community, basically? I can't remember exactly what she said, but she said, she might have said something like, she felt free here or something. But what she talked about, when I asked her what she meant by that, was she said, well, the men wash up too. So she'd come from a world, where kind of your gender entirely defined the sort of the job she did. And it was like a window into a different world. It was like I was sitting there with this woman who I'd only been talking to for a matter of minutes, but who came from such a different sort of culture as my own. It was so different. It was immediately apparent it was so different. It was literally like a window into a world that I'd never lived, never would live, hardly encounter. And yet, I felt a stronger connection with her, felt closer to her than I do to my family. So there was this really unusual mix of utter difference, and yet I was kind of closer to her in some way because of the Dharma, because of what we share. I was closer to her than my family. So I think that's the sort of deeper territory that we kind of get into here. But how is it that humanity is in some way one, whilst we're all so different? How is it? Is it that we're not really different? Well, no, that's not true. Is it? We really are different. But in some way we're one, and that's where we get into quite subtle territory. So perhaps one way of talking about that is just the development of self-awareness. That actually, if we're not aware, what happens is we simply act as we always have done. If you start to become self-aware, you start to see that, don't you? But we act habitually, automatically, in the ways that we always have done. And that acting is conditioned, that it goes back to it's sort of shaped. We're shaped, aren't we, by the environment that we've grown up in, by family environment, by our cultural environment. We sort of think the way we think is conditioned, is shaped by the society we're in, by the schooling that we've had. It's shaped even by our biology, isn't it? So we start to see, if we become self-aware, that actually we're conditioned. But that actually goes deeper. If we see conditioned, we see that actually it's not really us. That's what we're seeing, isn't it? If we see it as conditioned, if you were born somewhere else, you would be completely different. You'd be shaped in a completely different way. So it's not really you. So this self-awareness actually can deepen into disidentifying with our conditioning. And that shift in relationship allows us to see something deeper to us, allows us to see something more essential to humanity that we have in common. Ultimately, it's the unconditioned, which is what the Buddha fully sort of realized. So we see there's something that's not conditioned to us, and it's that we have in common with everybody. So, as I say, it ends up going quite deep, this sort of territory. But the point is that if we disidentify from our conditioning, well, some of that conditioning doesn't need to change. You could be an introvert. You don't need to be an extrovert to get to grow, do you? You remain an introvert. So actually, we're going to be different, and at the same time have something deeper in common. So can you see how actually we can be different and still have something in common? The danger is, of course, that if we're just sort of blindly identified with our conditioning, then and we encounter someone of different conditioning, then there's no common ground. Have you ever had that experience where you just feel there is no common ground here? There's no basis to relate. If you were the same, then you'd be able to sort of get along, wouldn't you? But actually, if you're wholly identified with your conditioning, you encounter other conditioning, there's no basis for communication. So that disidentifying allows us to see that there's something deeper. It's more essential to us, and therefore more essential to other people, enabling us to start to communicate. Anyway, so this is the sort of territory. It's not that well, when you become enlightened, you just become a sort of a kind of cutout of the Buddha. You know, you're exactly like the Buddha, and you get one of those things on your head. You know, and it's not like that. It's not actually like that. Somehow difference and sameness aren't mutually exclusive at a deeper level. And that is really what we're trying to do in Sangha. That's really what Sangha is about. That we're trying to more and more see our conditioning, the particularity of our conditioning, but disidentify from it so that we can actually relate on the basis of what's in common, humanity, which can never quite be pinned down. It's always a bit mysterious as to what that is, but you can sense it if you develop some of the ways. So I just wanted to contextualize our discussion kind of within that framework before we start. We may not quite get into that territory. Let's see where we go. Don't feel on the spot with us. We're just sort of, you know, I'm just really interested to kind of ask you guys about your experience. So, just by way of introduction, I should have done this at the beginning, shouldn't I? Well, actually, why don't I ask you to just say your name, and then would you say, well, why you're here, why you're not where you were born? Because you've all been quite courageous at some level, haven't you? Left the conditions, the familiar conditions of your birth to live in a foreign country. And it's got its challenges, it's got its opportunities, but it's got its challenges. So I wonder if maybe to start off with, you just give us a sort of a kind of snapshot of why you're here. If you see something. Are you happy to start?
So, yes, yeah. My name is Samamati. I live just around the corner with Arthasiddhi and others. So why am I here? Well, oddly enough, I'm from New Zealand originally, but I think the UK is probably the most similar country to New Zealand outside of New Zealand. Leaving aside Australia for the moment, which is another thing. So actually, in a way, I don't feel I'm in very foreign conditions. Yeah. Though it is different. I remember when back in the early 90s when I first came here, and in New Zealand we have lots of English, British television, and I thought it's just like being on telly here. When I'm going on the buses and around the streets and things, it's just like on the telly. So it's kind of very different, but also familiar. Yeah. So actually, my experience of internationality is not really this country. Though I do feel foreign here as well. I'm not English. I'm British, but not English.
Right. Yeah, and you've also lived in Mexico.
Yes.
For a while, and Japan and China and Africa yet? Or?
No.
Is that the totality?
I did grow up until I was 8 in a country called Vanuatu, which is a group of islands in the South Pacific. I've not lived in China.
No. Okay. Thanks for that.
So I'm Isabelle, and as you probably can hear, I'm French. So how do you, I come here. So it's through friendship. My intention was not to stay for 20 years in the UK initially, but more to just improve my English because I needed that professionally. But I had at the time a good friend of mine living in UK who was involved with the movement, and just through this friendship, I moved to UK, and so he thought it would be good for me to come to the center and do a meditation class. A year after, I started to work for a Buddhist company, and 20 years later, I'm still here. and my experience of so before moving to UK, I also lived for 6 years in Central America in Honduras, and that's been a very strong experience for me, and a lot of growth through that experience. That's me.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Arthasiddhi, for giving me this opportunity to talk about my favorite subject, internationality. My name is Sudipta. I was born and brought up in India. As you see me, I look different compared to these two guys. I speak differently. So yes, I do feel proud here at Cambridge. So why I came to UK? Well, in 2002, I did study about I became Mitra, and in my study we were talking about right learning, and in India we didn't get opportunity to explore that kind of activity, work with that kind of business. And I met this man here, Sadaraja, that time, and he did explain to me about right learning business and mentors. So I thought I was very young that time, and I thought, why not? I should try mentors, and I should try movement in the UK. And also, I was so much eager to see Bhante as well at that time. So that was sort of main highlight for me to come to the UK and also get out there, attend for the organization. So that was the reason to be in the UK. But now I got my family, my wife, I got a small daughter. She's 7 years old, and we are Buddhist family. And ready to explore new things in Cambridge.
So maybe the next question is just like, because in a way that's the sort of the history of the chronology, isn't it? But in a way, why? You could go back, couldn't you? You could all go back tomorrow. So what leads you to live? I mean, I know there's a whole it's probably a big answer. But in terms of the sort of the choice simply to live in culture, what's that about?
That's a good question. Easy one.
Yeah, I can go. Well, as I said, I was very young, before coming to UK, and I was living very comfortable, old conditioned life. I was living with my parents. I was very much dependent on my mother. She used to cook every day, breakfast, lunch, tasty lunch, breakfast, and she used to wash my clothes. So I was living like a prince, in my house. So that was my own conditioning. But having said that, I was struggling with my own conditioning, which is come from caste conditioning. I was struggling with my entry complex because I was staying with different community, Midkarites community. And during my study, I always wanted to explore different things because even though I said, we always feel very comfortable with our own conditioning, but at the same time we do miss opportunity. I was looking for something. And I remember during my study, like Mitra study, I read somewhere like Buddha used to ask monks, don't stay in one place and go on, change place, don't stick with same place with same people. And I was thinking about why Buddha said that, why Buddha didn't say, oh, monks, you should stay same place and just do your Dhamma work. And I learned something from that story, I need to change my conditioning, I need to look for new challenges, go somewhere else and explore things. So I took that decision. I came to UK. So early time, it was challenging for me. I did struggle, I have to say, in terms of, even though that time, I was calling myself, oh, I'm Indian, when I came here and I was trying to adjust with local culture. As Samamati said, you feel like this is Western country, isn't it? It's not too much for you. But coming from India, I felt like I'm on a different planet, completely. Like if I compare with my food, I used to have really nice homemade food, everyday lunch, breakfast cooked by my mother, and here I'm eating boiled potato. So you can imagine. So even though slowly I started learning new things, and I noticed, like my confidence suddenly is building up. I noticed that, during my process, coming here, connecting with different people, even though I look different, you guys look different. And it was very good experience, very positive experience. And I must say here, I would like to just, express my gratitude to Bhante. I was talking with Arthasiddhi during our lunch, during the tea break. So because of him, I'm here. I wouldn't be here, So if you ask me what's the beauty about Vietnam, I think Vietnam gave us sort of, platform, so much diversity here, and I can connect with you guys because of the Dharma. So without Dharma, I wouldn't be here. So answering your question, why I'm here still, because I'm still working on my own conditioning. I'm still working on own weaknesses. And also same time, I'm not saying, I'm sort of, neglecting my own conditioning. I'm saying here, I'm acceptance, new sort of opportunities.
Yeah, we talked about that. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, so somehow being here, it challenged you, but it gave you an opportunity to grow with confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. But what was it that enabled that it wasn't available at home?
That's a good question, actually. I will give you one example. I was staying in the community, so cleaning the toilet.
Yeah.
So if I see my background, my caste conditioning, certain people coming from certain castes, they only clean the toilet in India. Even my home, like one lady used to come from, because she was very poor, and she used to clean the toilet. So cleaning the toilet is my sort of, like barrier. Because that's you see what I mean, like, it's come from a caste conditioning. So at the beginning, I did struggle actually in the community. Whenever I tried to clean the toilet, I was struggling. Oh, this is not my job. So you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that gave me sort of opportunity to work on my own condition. When I saw here, like, many senior order members, they were like, washing plates, cleaning the
Cleaning
toilets.
toilets.
That's giving me inspiration. Like, I'm not in India, though, so I'm working on my own conditioning, So that gave me sort of an opportunity to see my own conditioning and also learn from new things. And having said that, even, since I left India, I started appreciating my own culture as well. Same time. I didn't hate.
Yeah.
So I can see the difference between, Western culture and Indian culture, and its good and weaknesses. I mean, I'm not saying, like, here is everything is perfect, but same with India, nothing is perfect there. So yeah, that's my experience.
Anyone else like to answer that question?
I think for me, initially to move from France to Honduras is a sense of wanting to connect with a different culture, wanting to discover a different culture. And there was and it was, I guess, coming also from my background, because although I'm French, also I'm half Portuguese, and my family immigrated from Portugal to France after the Second World War. So there was something there that I didn't really understand at the time, but that was kind of pushing me to kind of, because the Portuguese culture was there, but not very strongly. So it was not like I could identify with this. So there's something like pushing me to kind of trying to understand something, but I didn't know what exactly. And I could see there was that's how there has always been this kind of interest with other cultures. It's like and I grew up in a very small town, and kind of working class towns. People were not like very open. I needed something more, and I need to broaden my mind. There was, as I said, it was not like a conscious, was more like that was pushing me in that kind of direction. And I had the opportunity to go there. It wasn't like I wanted absolutely to go there. It was just the opportunity. And what I discovered was not what I was expecting. That was quite because I didn't know what to expect in a way. So it probably was better because it was when you're younger, you take more risks in a way. Yeah, but and I didn't speak Spanish, so it seems like, you know, why going there?
Yeah.
But I also wanted to go into a country where I knew the culture was going to be very different from mine. I had some experience with a friend from Morocco. I had when I was at university, and I spent the summer there. I just, I don't know, I just loved that sense of being able to connect with people even beyond not being able to speak the same language. So some of Moroccans can speak French, but not everybody. And just, which is not easy, but trying to discover another culture, but still managing to connect with people. And that was kind of the thread. But at the same time, I could see, and again, it was not very conscious at the time, but I was discovering some parts of me I was not aware of. And I just wanted more of that. That was quite strong. So yeah, that was really kind of there. And it was there coming to, moving here to UK as well, in a different way. That's probably why I'm still here 20 years later. It's like I could go in, you know, that side of me, or sides, it's not just one, through being involved with the Dharma and the movement. So that, but also having being part of a movement that is international. That's really, really, for me, that's kind of really important. And I feel like I'm not, even now I have to say I'm French, but I don't feel French. Part of me is French, another part is Honduran, another part is Portuguese, another part is English. And I think also with my friendships, I feel like I absorb some of their culture. So yes, all that identity, the kind of it's not there, it's kind of really blurred, and I like that. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I can really resonate with that too. I lived in different places at different times, and just feeling kind of less attached to a particular place. I was reflecting just last week, actually, when receiving the invitation, that in a way, I can't answer your question, but in a way, I feel like the country I live in is free right now. So when I go to Mexico or New Zealand or other places, I was in East briefly last year, and I met a lecturer in Singapore and in Taiwan. And so when I go to places, I've got friends in Spain that I stay with and visit and so on. So I feel like I'm in free right in the world. I don't mean that as a sort of bubble. I'm also very much in contact with the cultures and other people who are not tree running as well. So it's not a sort of like insular thing you're talking about. But why I'm still here, I suppose, and not in New Zealand, I mean, I came here in the early 90s to pursue ordination, got ordained the year after I arrived. And I didn't really have the intention of staying here long term. Thought I'd come here to get trained up, I suppose, and get ordained. So after a few years, one of the people ordained in my ordination course was a Mexican. We were friends from that course, and he was around the Buddhist Centre where I was. And he went back to Mexico a couple of years later after ordination and started Dharma activities there. And he was always just inviting me out for visiting. No pressure. Anyway, so when I got freed up from my responsibility where I was about 25 years ago, I went for a visit, stayed for a few months, and there was quite a strong response to the Dharma. That the way it was very kind of engaged and very committed as well to just straight down the line through that as well. And so a lot of people were coming along. Well, he's a good friend and he needs help, so I decided to stay there. I finished it myself for 5 years. So I lived, yeah, I lived in Mexico for 5 years. And actually, and then I came back to the UK afterwards. About 10 or 12 years ago, I did actually go back to live in New Zealand. But a major reason why I came back here was, and this is part of my conditioning, you would say, or my psychology or something, but you know, as I did by going to Mexico, I really want to communicate the Dharma, and to spread the Dharma to other people, you know, and one thing I've learned about myself is that I can offer more by being in more supportive conditions. And at the time I was working at Buddhist Trading, which is a big business that we had, living in very supportive conditions here in the UK, where the order's much stronger, much more opportunities for me. And I just felt I could offer a lot more by being here than I could from New Zealand. Obviously, I could offer a lot more to New Zealand, but and by that stage also I was well, after I left Mexico, I continued my involvement, going back about once a year since I left, involved particularly in the men's ordination process. Yeah, and I just felt New Zealand is physically, economically, psychologically just too far from Mexico to be able to do that. And so that was a big reason why I came here. Yeah, so that's a introduction, and I've continued involved with the Mexico. Well, I still do. Yeah. There's other reasons too, you know. I like it here actually. Oddly enough. I love Cambridge, and I love, you know, the culture, and the order's very strong, and well, we have them in New Zealand too. Yeah. But I think just the culture is much stronger here. I mean, I love New Zealand. You know, it's a wonderful place. But you know, and as you get older, you know, you build up contacts and friendships and relationships much more deeply in certain places, and it became a bit more tenuous in New Zealand. In my case, so that's a big reason why I'm still here. Probably those two things really is wanting to be able to have the supportive conditions to offer more, but also, well, a good place to be.
And the fact that, you know, the country and true that living is an international.
Indeed.
That is important to them.
Oh yes. You know, I've done some traveling in my life, but I don't really like traveling particularly, and you know, I'm not interested in going places just for the sake of it, for the tourist or thing. I really want to go to places more these days to be and befriend people, and you know, different things with people.
So it'd be interesting, this area of well, becoming more self-aware through encountering a different culture. Sometimes that can, if we're sort of you know, there can be aspects to us that are blind. We're not really aware that we're just assuming things are like this. You know, when you encounter a different culture, suddenly you get this kind of this part that comes up and says, "Why is it like this?" You know. So I just wonder if any of you can share. I mean, actually, you've already shared this a bit, haven't you? But examples of putting yourself in a different culture, enabling you to become more self-aware. So this is touching into the area of the spiritual challenge, really. Internationality with the spiritual challenge. Yeah, so you've got any stories?
I can share.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Yeah, thank you. Nice to hear from both of you. Right. So in India, within the Sangha or in the culture, how do we express our friendship? Holding each other's hand, showing like this, hugging each other. So men can hug, you know, and also women can hug. So that was a challenge for me coming to the UK. So I remember my first week in Cambridge, and I was walking with my friend. I was trying to hold his hand, and it was like, "Go away!" And I was really surprised. So it took me a while to understand, conditioning here. It's like, when I'm not saying people here, they don't express their friendship, they do, but different way. In India, we have different sort of, conditioning culture we experience. Like in India, if you see the men, they can't hug women. That's the cultural conditioning. But men with each other, they can hug. Here is different. You see? So that was sort of, like challenge for me. But I took as an opportunity, isn't it? Like, because I always wanted to train myself. I'm in different culture, different conditioning. So if I want, I can go back to India, that time. But it was a challenge for me. I did struggle for a while. But again, I have to appreciate Sangha. So I did get help from many spiritual friends that time. I was talking with different friends, my Kalandupra, my community member. So
what was the value of that challenge? Because that's a challenge to deal with, for sure, isn't it? What was the sort of value of that?
I would say at the beginning, I wasn't aware about my own condition. Something was happening there, and I wasn't aware about that. So through talking with different people, different friends, spiritual friends, I understood that, because they got their own experience. I learned from their experience. It wasn't easy to understand that. But you need to wait. You have to be patient to understand that. And again, it's a process. It's not like quick thing. Because you guys like Sadaraja, he does go to India for often. Arthasiddhi has been to India. Same with you guys. You might be struggling there. What's happening. If you go to different country, the India is like different planet. Compared to New Zealand and France. Yes.
Right. Thanks very much.
Does it make sense?
It does. It's good. Yeah.
So going back to Honduras.
Yeah.
Honduras, very different culture. It's talking with some Indian friends, there's similarities. It can be very noisy, chaotic, and sense of time is very different from sense of time in here. So buses are not on time. You don't know how long it will take to go from one place to another. Having a meeting at a certain time doesn't happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. If you try to meet someone, they may come an hour, 2 hours later, but they may not come. And I was facing that. I remember in the first year, all the time. And what came was, I was so annoyed. So I was coming from, really used to, from my conditioning, things can be done and being efficient. There was a sense of you have to be efficient, you have to plan ahead. And in a way, I couldn't escape it because that was there all the time. So it's like constant mirror. And I could feel that for months. And I didn't know what to do with this. It was just, that emotion there. And I remember at some point, I kind of thought I need to do something about it. Either I decide to leave Honduras, or I need to change my way of relating to this. And I still wanted to be there. I still wanted to discover the country. I could see my conditioning so clearly. It was really there in front of me. And it was also painful to see, because you see how much you are attached to a certain way of being. So So it took me kind of, it didn't happen from a day to another. That was kind of gradual, just to, in a way, yeah, there's a lot, you know, after being a Buddhist, there's a lot of similarities there, but I didn't know at the time. Just having to accept that's the way it is. I can't change it. So, and what else was there? Let go of my way of wanting things to happen, and being in a certain way. So there's a lot of that, and after with this, it was also trying to see the other side, their side, like in a way, what I've started to see and later on to appreciate. They were more living in the present time, but they were not always planning things ahead. So,
Not in a way.
But that was, yeah, and seeing there was value in it, which was not something I was used to. So and I was having the life experience of it, but also having to absorb that and to change my, yeah, in a way, it's like slowly you change a certain identity, a certain attachment to a certain identity. And after what came was like being creative. So because I still wanted to have meetings happening at a certain time. So I decided, well, I will tell someone to come at 2 for meeting happening at 4. So, and they might arrive on time. Didn't always work well, but it was all, yeah, there was a lot of learning and growth by having to, I couldn't escape that. It was there all the time. I was immersed in that culture, and in a way I had to embrace it. So yeah, there's also the sense of, oh, I want to avoid it. I don't want to go there, but after it was embracing, and I've learned a lot, and it's been very helpful for me to just, you know, that experience.
Or you also bring out very strongly the sense of enrichment. I guess that's what it is about living in an intentional culture, isn't it? But it's not just that they're different, actually, it's enriched by the difference. It's an enriched culture as opposed to a sort of merely an English culture, merely one way of doing things. It's enriched with a sense of appreciation of the values within that other culture. So it's starting to emerge.
Yeah, it's going towards, you know, I was really like going towards people and trying to understand their culture that was so different from mine. So yeah, trying to stay open to that, and again, yeah, it's going to tapping into the connection, wanting really to connect.
Also, really brings out the challenge. Still brings out the challenge. That's actually with Sudipta as well. That sometimes it's only when we really challenge ourselves and persist with that challenge, because you know you have to, because you're in that culture, that you really start to see, my goodness, actually I'm conditioned, and this is just, I'm attached to this, and you don't need to be. So Martin, you got anything?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of my experience overseas is with Mexico, so and it's not as extreme as India or even Honduras. Subhuti, who's been to India a lot for quite a long time, he's been to Mexico recently for 2 visits, and he said Mexico is a bit like India with the volume turned right down. So it's still loud, but not nearly as loud as India, as it were. Yeah. But I think you're right about if I don't fight, you know, these differences that I'm not used to, then you know I can sort of relax into it more. I remember years ago, a friend of mine called Sima Devi, who was up at Liverpool. She was the women's mitral convener in Mexico when I lived there for those 5 years, and she was giving a talk one evening, and she arrived a bit late because the traffic or something like that. And Mexico's a huge, complex city, and she said, "Oh, Mexico's wonderful. You know, you can never be late for anything, even for your own talk." You know? So I think if I don't fight it so much, then it is, I to kind of relax into it more. An area that I haven't been so good about that is with traffic. I remember after living in Mexico, coming back to the UK and being really kind of puzzled about cars stopping on pedestrian crossings for me. I genuinely found that I couldn't work it out. It wasn't just. And so in Mexico, I tried the opposite. I'd sort of walk out in front of the cars and make them stop. And I remember one occasion, this guy yelled out the window something rude about my mother. So I just yelled back at him. I won't repeat it. Anyway, but I've realised that's actually quite dangerous, believe it or not. So I've heard the horror stories about traffic. But I do find it's interesting that the areas that I find difficult to kind of let go of, and that is one of them. It's, I just expect traffic to be more polite to pedestrians. But in the Sangha, I found that well, as here as anywhere really, but perhaps more obvious in some way where the culture and the people are more different from me is I've had to just relate to people as individuals, just as one-to-one, in order to really make communication. And I've just had to sort of find my common ground, I suppose, with them. When I'm in Mexico, I meet up with quite a lot of people and hear lots of stories and that and experiences. And the only way as I say, to really relate to the person, I have to be as much of an individual myself and kind of go beyond my particular condition. Interesting in Mexico, you mentioned that men and women don't hug. In Mexico, women very much hug men or everybody, and that's a thing I found a bit funny. I'd go to the Buddhist Centre and someone who's a complete stranger to me would just come up and kiss me on the cheeks and that. So there's things that I just have to kind of get used to. But very much kind of trying to be an individual, I think, and relate to others just as a human being. Very helpful. In fact, essential. Without that, I just couldn't function with them at all. And I think that's more easy in the context of the Sangha, where we are trying to be just individuals. And that is something that's helped me, I think, to go beyond my condition, just to find where is my humanity with this person, even though we're so different.
Right. I'm just aware of time. It may be that there are questions in people's minds. So I just wanted to pause and see if there was anything that was sort of bubbling up. By way of questions, if you're happy.
We're happy.
Yeah.
Yes, we.
Yeah. So go ahead.
When you go back to, I'm guessing that being a homeland, you feel that you can relate to you differently now that you have experienced in these different conditions? Or do you still feel, you've already said a bit about that you still feel like you belong there? But yeah, but
I can go. What's the I give you an example. I left UK in 2016 due to my family situation. I went back to India and I started living in Pune, in India. So before that, I did stay for a few years in UK. And unconsciously, I learned a few habits from UK, like lifestyle and everything. And when I went there, everyone wanted to talk to me. So I couldn't find a place to stay calm in India. I wanted to run away from people, and I noticed that in a strong way. And people notice as well, even my brother and even my relatives, why he told to be quiet in his room? Why is not talking with us? This is really strange. So yes, I did struggle there as well. It's very interesting to see how. So yeah, I mean, that's a challenge for me. But whenever I go back to India, I do struggle with people because I don't know how, but people notice, Yeah, they do notice. Anything else?
Quite a different experience for me. In fact, yeah, surprisingly, I feel like I go back and people are not really interested in my life. You know, either in Honduras or here. So it's like, yeah, I feel like going back to my old self, but I'm not the same person anymore. So that's a bit strange for me. And the only thing they have said is that when I lived in Central America, so I was visiting my family and friends, so I said, oh, you know, you speak French with a Spanish accent. And now I live in UK, and that's the same. And say, oh, you speak French with an English accent, and that's
I mean, I did have a cheeky question for you as well. Did you stay in UK that people would turn up on?
It's bad in France.
I'm not quite sure what people think of me when I go back to New Zealand. I was there in December actually, and that was the first time in nearly 10 years. So I noticed the country's changed quite a bit. It was changing. So that's one thing I noticed. But there was a Dharmacharini who said to me once, "You sound like a bloody Poland." So thank you, my dear. Anyway, so I think that, you know, the way I speak has changed. Though it's not necessarily because I've been away a lot. I think there was a period in my life when I lived in Japan and I taught English, and I had, in order to be understood, I had to try and speak with a more standard, what I thought was a standard English accent, or you know. So I dated to them, but that was yeah. But certainly, yes, interesting. My relationship to New Zealand, especially from this last visit, is it's changing a lot, and I don't know that I'm going along with that change. You know, it's very good change, nothing wrong with it really, but it's becoming very much a country in the South Pacific, in the Pacific Ocean. I think it'll probably change its name at some point, and developing quite a different sort of identity from when I lived there. So, you know, do I feel at home? Is it the same country sort of thing? Well, yeah, not a criticism at all, but it's just interesting experience and observation. Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, I've got another one.
Yeah.
Just wondering about, well, all three of you, not too deep about speak. So, just wondering, when you're thinking, which language do you think it's like? And how does that work? Can you repeat the question in your answer, please?
This is for the recording.
The recording.
So when we're multilingual now, and
Yeah.
or it's bilingual. So when we're thinking, what language do we think in? Is that the question? I still very much think in English.
Yeah.
And even like when I give a talk, when I write notes and that for it, I write them in English mostly, because I've discovered, I've done a little bit of translation, and I found it easier to translate into Spanish from English than just translate into English from Spanish. And I think it's because the English goes straight in, and then I come out with Spanish as the word you're speaking. So when I've got my notes in English, they sort of go, the meaning idea goes in immediately, and then I just come out with Spanish. So that's
Maybe just go to
Yeah, I think for me it has changed with time. So as I have been absorbing another language, before I was kind of translating from the foreign language to my language and so on. But after, just thinking in the other language. But I can see also sometimes if I take notes, what will come is, I don't know, the pastors and the kind of more accurate words. So it could be, if I could write with the 3 languages I speak, that would be just great, you know, but it's difficult to communicate that way. But there's something there, and it's not conscious. It's just, so I'm not translating anymore. I haven't done that for a long time. But I feel that, there's still, that's happening sometimes, where the words are coming in another language, and I'm surprised, but I think it's how the brain functions. Yeah.
Right. And so just another question.
I was just thinking that there's a lot to be learned from what you said about your cultural aspects, about how we can adapt to people in our own culture. We don't really need to move forward. you know, you've lots and lots of expectations and become aware of conditioning and you change the way you relate to people in ways that sound very useful and sensible, but even within our own local environment. I think it would be great if you can say something about how that's impacted on your general flexibility in terms of when you people, you know, here or in your own country. You know, what do you think, you know, what kind of adaptations do you think you've made that are the most generic in that sense? Most across within a culture as well as
well, I mean, I've been around Triat long enough to have met, you know, quite a number of people and heard a lot of life stories in there. And I'm very often amazed at when I hear someone's life story, how different they are from what my assumptions were, my preconceptions. Yeah. And so I've learned to sort of train myself more not to make assumptions about people when I meet them, you know, whether they're foreign or whether they're English or New Zealand or whatever. Just just meet them and tell us I don't know about this person. You know, I've been caught out so many times by my own not prejudices but just assumptions about. For example, a couple of guys 7 years ago on an ordination course, I was in a group when we were talking about life stories, and they both had PhDs, very successful academically and so on in their jobs. And I just assumed they'd come from quite, you know, well-to-do families and well-educated. Not a bit of it. Very, very humble backgrounds. Very, very difficult too. It was just a very good lesson.
Because it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, their lifestyle can be very different from what you think they would be. But you can relate, can't you? I mean, you and I, Mr. This is a hundred different stories, and I can relate to them, even though they come from a completely different world. Something essentially human.
There isn't time, unfortunately. Yeah. We've gone slightly over.
Yeah, we're not English tonight.
It's international.
Give us one Indian question then.
Well, maybe it's a difficult question actually, so my answer. So as soon as you are in very different country, you became foreigner. That's something you are there. So being foreigner or feeling foreigner in country can be very fascinating experience or lonely experience. So how do you work with that? Also, my experience in being in India and here is kind of like Wardo state, neither Indian, neither English. That could be interesting state of mind. I would say very creative actually. But anyway, how do you work with this kind of lonely? Can be lonely being foreigner. Because sometimes people here, they will always see you as Indian. They wouldn't see your English or British. So there's particular state of mind being experienced, being just in different countries. That's can be interesting, challenging. I wonder how you have any reflection on that.
There's one person there.
Maybe non-Indian.
Yeah. Well, again, for me, probably the strongest experience about this was when I was in Honduras, especially because I didn't speak, the language, didn't speak Spanish to start with, and so very different culture. I guess it's just kind of having to connect with you at a deeper level, because it's you with you in a way, and a lot of people around, but you can't connect really with them at that stage. So there's kind of a it's not always easy, but I think it's been also helpful to kind of have. It's like you are in a solitary retreat with a lot of people around, because you are just more with yourself and facing yourself every day. So there's a lot of discovery coming with this, and it's just kind of staying with this as well, and trying to embrace it as much as you can. But yes, as I said, it's not always easy, and not especially what you would like. But yeah, I think for me it has been very helpful in terms of growth as well, to have that. See, I could be okay with this kind of situation, and it helped me a lot when I moved to UK, because I already had that experience, and it takes time. Like the first year, there's always, they say that the first year is really a kind of challenging one. But I already knew how to manage that. And I think that was, very, very beneficial. And the second part is, in a way, I feel like two sides of being a foreigner. So yeah, you can feel a bit isolated, but the other side, what I also like, is like it gives you more freedom, because in a way, when you are in your culture, people expect you to be a certain way, according to, all the conditioning coming with your culture. But because you live in another culture, you can be different, and it's fine for people in that culture. And I like that as well. And sometimes I play with it in terms of what you can say and how you can say, and it's kind of, and it's good also for people you connect with, because they are kind of, you are challenging them in their own culture, in a way, in their own ways of their own conditioning. So I think it's kind of, it can, again, it's kind of looking at all the sides and being creative around, being a foreigner. So what does that mean in a way? Yeah, as I said, for me, I don't feel like, what does that mean to be English or French or whatever? So yes, it's also reflecting more on that.
Great. Well, lastly, just to say thanks very much, Isabelle, Samamati, and Sudipta.
Thank you.